Hello, this is Jerry Morton. Welcome to my Finding My Way podcast. This is podcast number 57, titled The Chipmunk. Podcasts 34 through 61 are stories from the year of Army training I experienced. The training started in August 1966 and ended in June 1967. The stories are published in the book Reluctant Lieutenant, From Basic to OCS in the 60s, which was published by Texas A&M University Press as a military history. Podcast 57, The Chipmunk, is an account of Jerry being assigned an impossible task to accomplish at the celebration party for achieving senior candidate status a month before graduating from infantry OCS in the late spring of 1967. No one knew if the mission could be accomplished until the last possible moment. It is recommended that you listen to the Army training stories in the order in which the podcast numbers present them, so that you can appreciate the full contextual richness of this and later stories. Podcast 57, The Chipmunk. As we approach senior candidate status, a lot of the guys started dropping out. Gene, of the Dirty Boots and the Sleeping Patrol, quit. I felt guilty about that. My anger over the Dirty Boots for that inspection had been out of line. Nor did my capturing him in the field help his case. Things were happening so fast you just did not have time to digest them. 5th Platoon had done such a good job of staying together. We knew guys from the other platoons were dropping out. Our brag was that we were all going to graduate. It was a shock to see so many leave in such a short time. We had come so far together. After Nate, Jim, and his cube mate left, we had stabilized. Now, in short order, we had lost more than 30% of our guys. It was unnerving. One day we were together, and the next we lost a lot of people. You did not get a chance to ask why or say goodbye. They were just gone. Lieutenant McCook's 4th Platoon had given him a rabbit. The rabbit was dyed pink. He was very proud of that rabbit. As he stalked between the dining hall tables, he would shout out about his pink rabbit. He boasted that the rabbit was not dyed pink. It was uniquely and naturally pink. When he sat at the officers' dining table, you could hear his booming voice telling all of the other tactical officers how much his platoon loved him. None of them had been so blessed, he pointed out. Lieutenant Cook seemed to lean the most heavily on Lieutenant Strauss, our tactical officer. It was my misfortune to be walking past the officers' table after the evening meal when Lieutenant McCook was riding Lieutenant Strauss particularly hard. "And my children love that pink rabbit," Lieutenant McCook bellowed to Lieutenant Strauss. "My 4th Platoon men are the most thoughtful, considerate group of men in this man's army. They have balls. They do anything. They can do anything, including smuggling a pink rabbit on post." Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Lieutenant Strauss staring at me. I picked up my pace and began moving faster than my table mates. They fell a step or two behind me, which caused me to stand out even more. Lieutenant Strauss stood as he shouted at me, "I want my platoon morale officer now!" Oh, his command stopped me in mid-stride. I turned. With a brisk military march that included squaring all corners, I approached the officers' dining table. Whipping a crisp salute, I stopped in front of Lieutenant Strauss and said, "Sir, Candidate Morton reports, sir." Retuning my salute with irritation, Lieutenant Strauss spoke. "I want a Chipmunk candidate. I want a live Chipmunk presented to me at the senior status party." "They can't do it," Lieutenant McCook shouted. "They'll come up with some stupid substitute. The whole bunch of them are wimps." "I do not want some stuffed monkey toy with wood chips glued to its shoulders. I want a real, live chipmunk. Do you understand?" Lieutenant Strauss said, with his face reddening. "Sir, yes, sir," I briskly replied. "They'll botch it, for sure," Lieutenant McCook shouted, rocking back in his chair. "You'll see, Strauss. They'll wind up giving you some cheap substitute." "Morton," Lieutenant Strauss said sharply, his eyes squinting at me in a piercing glare, "if you don't present me with a live chipmunk at the party, all weekend passes for the platoon are canceled." Lieutenant McCook shouted out, "They'll get you a mouse and paint stripes on it." He roared with laughter at his own imagery. Lieutenant Strauss' face was red. "Get me my Chipmunk." "Sir, yes, sir," I shot back. "That's all," he said, dismissing me. I saluted sharply. He returned the salute. As I walked out of the building, I noticed that talking in the mess hall had ceased. All eyes seemed to be on me as I marched out. Walking down the steps outside the mess hall, I could hear Lieutenant McCook's voice berating Lieutenant Strauss and telling him he had just better be prepared to cancel the passes because we could not do it. Actually, I was kind of thinking along the same lines as Lieutenant McCook. How were we going to come up with a live chipmunk? I had no idea where or how to capture one. The party was just 3 weeks off. Maybe chipmunks lived on post. If they did, they had stayed well hidden. I could not recall seeing one during my stay at Fort Benning. Heck, 4th Platoon had someone go to a pet shop and get a rabbit that had been dyed pink. We would just get someone to pick up a chipmunk at a pet store. This was a piece of cake. I felt good walking back to the platoon bay. As I walked into the bay, it was clear that everyone had gotten the word. "What are you going to do, Jerry?" I was asked immediately. "We'll get one from a pet shop," came my confident retort. "That's right," interjected one of the guys. "My wife works at a big pet store in Atlanta. She can get us one and bring it to the party. You can present it to Strauss there, right in front of McCook." "Good. Give her a call and set it up," I said, clapping him on the back. We were all in good spirits. This was an easy task. We would have fun presenting it in some dramatic manner. It would be great sport watching McCook eat his words. Our daily routine of inspections, rushing to the mess hall, getting on trucks, attending classes in the buildings and in the field, coming back to the barracks, eating, studying, getting ready for the morning inspection and lights out, continued uninterrupted. About 12 days or so before the big party, the guy with the pet store wife approached me. We've got trouble, Jerry, he said grimly. No pet store in America has a chipmunk. My wife has called pet stores all over the country to find one and have it shipped to her store. She's talked to pet stores in California, New York, New Orleans, everywhere. This is not the right time of year for chipmunks to be available. Oh, whoa. I had not expected this to be a problem. Guys were having their wives and girlfriends come from all over the country. They were heavily planning on an off-post weekend pass. This had the makings of a disaster. We called a platoon meeting. It was tense. Ideas were flowing. Let's just get something that looks like a chipmunk, one fellow threw out. Hey, that's it, another enthusiastically responded. We'll get something that looks like one and dye it or change it to be a perfect match. My wife said a gerbil just looks like a chipmunk, the guy with the pet store wife said. It just doesn't have any stripes on his back. No, we can't put paint on anything, I shot back. McCook already thought of that and cut us off. When he challenged Lieutenant Strauss, he said we would probably paint stripes on some mouse or something. Putting paint on some animal won't work. It worked for McCook's rabbit, came someone's quick reply. Yeah, but he won't admit that, another countered. We'll just have to capture our own chipmunk, another chimed in. That's it. That's what we'll have to do. This was getting out of hand. Wait a minute. Does anybody know how to capture a chipmunk or where they live? I asked. Answers to my question came in from all sides. They live in trees. No, they don't. They live in holes in the ground in the woods. They live on golf courses. That last one was too much. Laughing, I asked, how do you know they live on golf courses? I used to caddy at a golf course, and they were a problem. They dig these little holes everywhere. I heard that the groundskeeper caught them. He caught them by getting on a long. He got a long string and made a noose with it. He'd place the noose around the hole and then play out the string for 10 yards or so, I don't know. Lying on his stomach, he would patiently wait. When the chipmunk stuck his head out of the hole, he jerked the string. The little sucker was caught. Well, I said with a sigh, does anyone know if there's a golf course on post? Oh, sure there is, Scotty said. But they'd spot you right off that you were in OCS and ask where you were, what you were doing there instead of out training. You're right, I replied, thinking of the slush fund disaster. We'll have to look for the chipmunk in the trees or the woods or somewhere else. Who should we get to go out and catch it? That question was met with silence. Breaking the spell, Scotty spoke up. You'll have to do it. It'll have to be you. We'll cover for you. You just take a day off and go catch one. Take a day when we're all scheduled to be in a classroom all day. We'll cover for you. That way you'll have all day to catch one." It was agreed. 2 days passed before we were slated for a full day of classroom instruction. I ducked out as the guys were loading onto the trucks. 3 or 4 miles from our barracks was a large stand of trees. I briskly walked to them. It was important to walk briskly. A candidate with a brisk walk was on a mission. Anyone seeing me would assume that I knew exactly where I was going and why. The probability was low that someone would stop me to ask why I was not with my unit. My pace would tell them that I was on a mission that needed to be completed as quickly as possible so that I could rejoin my unit. As I walked, I pondered my mission. There was doubt in my mind as to where chipmunks really lived. Sure, I knew what one looked like, but I could not recall ever actually seeing one in the wild. It was ironic. I prided myself on knowing all about the woods. I had been a Boy Scout camp counselor for 2 summers outside Kenosha, Wisconsin. Furthermore, my recreational time had been spent hiking in the woods outside of Racine, Wisconsin, during junior high school. I was a camper, yet I did not know where a chipmunk lived, let alone how to capture one. This situation was pathetic. There was little chance I would succeed on this mission. It was a waste of time. I wanted to give up. Well, I had to try. All of the guys were depending on me. I had to do it. I had to do what I knew to do, even if it did not work. In the woods, I looked for chipmunk signs, squirrel signs, any kind of signs. All I saw were a few sparrows. I looked for squirrel nests in the trees. Maybe chipmunks had nests in trees. It seemed logical that they would, although that did not fit with the golf course story. One tree had a hollow knothole in it about 30 feet off the ground. A chipmunk could be curled up sleeping in it at that very moment. No, that was a stupid thought. Nevertheless, I decided to climb up and see. If there was no chipmunk, I would at least be able to tell the guys I had tried everything I could think of to do. The tree was difficult to climb. I had to hug it and inch my way up. Right off, I could feel my highly polished brass belt buckle scraping against the bark. Damn! It would take hours and hours of polishing to get it back to inspection level. Looking down at my combat boots, I could see deep scratches appearing on the toes and sides. My neatly starched fatigue pants and shirt were stained and wrinkled from the pushing and scraping up the tree trunk. At last I was there. Regrettably, I could not see far enough into the knothole to tell if anything was in it. There was only one thing to do. I had to push my hand down into it. I hoped I would grab onto something alive and jerk it out. Fat chance, I thought. It was more probable I would get my fingers bitten off. Then I would jerk my bleeding, mangled hand out as fast as I could, and then I would lose my grip and fall out of the tree. This was just too stupid. I could not do it. But the guys were counting on me. If there was a chipmunk in this knothole and I let it get away, I could not live with myself. I was not going to let the guys down simply because of being bitten by some unknown creature that probably did not exist in the first place. Carefully, I slipped my hand into the hole. My fingers were spread to grab whatever brushed against them. Nothing but filth at the bottom of the hole. What a waste of time. What a waste of hours polishing my boots and belt buckle. Finally, reaching the ground, I took a good look at myself. My uniform was a disaster. If a tactical officer stopped me now, I would be in a world of hurt. No OCS candidate would be allowed to walk around post looking as filthy as I did. He would attract immediate attention. Someone would want to know what was going on. I had to stay away from people. For the rest of the day, I wandered through the grassy areas looking for a chipmunk. For chipmunk holes, nuts, nutshells, anything that might give me a hint that a chipmunk was near. There was no water to be had. Food was out of the question. The day was a disaster. Instead of a senior status party being a time of celebration, it was going to be a disaster. I felt sorry for the guys and their wives, sweethearts, and dates, and sorry for everything else. I had to come up with something. If we could not get a live chipmunk to give to Lieutenant Strauss, we had to give him something he would accept. The gerbil would have to do. We could not paint it. He would know it was not a chipmunk. How could we make him think it was a chipmunk? As I was hiding in the bushes near the barracks, waiting for the trucks to bring the company back from classes, it came to me. This just might work. Crowd control was the key. Everyone would have to be amused and surprised at the same time. The high of the moment would have to carry Lieutenant Strauss into accepting my story. It would work if I could surprise everyone. I knew it could work. I hoped it would work. No, I was pretty sure it would work if I got the crowd with me. It might not. This was our best shot, so it just damn well would work. My mind was set. We would do it. While the guys were offloading from the trucks, I slipped in with them. We rushed up the stairs together. 5th Platoon knew from my appearance I had tried. I explained that it was not possible to find a chipmunk. There were no arguments with me on that point. Are you sure a gerbil looks just like a chipmunk except that it has no stripes? I asked the pet store contact. I've never seen one. Yeah, I'm sure it's the same size, the tail is short like a chipmunk's, and it has the same short brown fur, he reassured me. Then we'll use it. We'll say it's a chipmunk, I declared. That won't work, one of the guys interjected. They'll know it's not a chipmunk unless you paint it or something. Nope, I said flatly. We can't paint it. I'll present it as it is, with a story. It will work. I've thought it all through. You guys just have to back me up. It's risky, but it's the best I can do with so little time. Turning back to the guy with the pet store wife, I asked, "Can your wife have it here in a cage to present at the party?" "Sure, that won't be a problem," he said with confidence. "Okay," I said, turning to Scotty. "You get me a kid stuffed monkey with wood chips glued on its shoulders." "Strauss said he wouldn't accept that," came Scotty's quick reply. "I know. The stuffed monkey is just to set Strauss and the others up. They'll protest, then we'll bring in the gerbil with my story. Strauss will take the gerbil as a chipmunk." "What's the whole setup, Cherry?" Scotty asked. "I have to keep it a secret. The key to pulling this off is everybody's spontaneous reaction to the story. If they react the way I think they will, we've got us a live chipmunk. That's all I can say, okay?" "Okay," said Scotty and several of the guys. Others nodded their heads in approval. Everything was set for that evening. The gerbil had arrived. Scotty and crew had a stuffed monkey with a large wood chip glued on each shoulder. It looked a little as if it had lieutenant's bars on it. I briefed the two crews. No one would mention the chipmunk at the party. At some point, Lieutenant Strauss or Lieutenant McCook would not be able to stand it any longer. One of them would call out for the chipmunk. The 5th Platoon guys and their dates would form a circle around them. That would bring everyone else into the circle to see what was going on. I would make my way to Lieutenant Strauss. After making a short speech, I would call for the chipmunk. Scotty and his crew would be hiding with the stuffed monkey, so no one would see it beforehand. They would rush through the crowd and give it to me. I would present it to Strauss. He would say that it was unacceptable. I would tell him that I knew it was. We just wanted to demonstrate what inferior candidates would present. We had a live chipmunk to give him, but I needed to tell him about it first. I would tell a long, involved story about it and then announce its presence. At that point, the other crew would come out of hiding and rush forward with the gerbil in its cage. They would give it to me and I would give it to the lieutenant. The rest was up to the crowd and Lieutenant Strauss. The key to pulling it off was not allowing anyone to see the stuffed monkey or the gerbil until I called for them. We were all agreed on the plan of action. We were all in our green dress uniforms. The women were beautiful. We were all happy. The tactical officers were decked out in their dress blue uniforms. They looked like cavalry officers in an old Western movie. Every officer had a lovely woman with him, either his wife or a date. I did not know if any of them were married except for Lieutenant McCook. Captain Green, our company commander, looked particularly sharp. He had lots of medals. What a relief it was to finally be a senior candidate. The band was a slight disappointment. They looked as if they were all junior high school kids. Maybe they were in high school, but it was doubtful. Their parents had come with them. The accompanying adults sat in the background, but interacted with various band members frequently. For young people, they played fairly well. It really did not make any difference. We were all too happy to let bad music ruin the night. I missed Anna. However, if she had been there, I would not have enjoyed her very much. I was having second thoughts about my plan, but I was determined not to show it. Its success depended upon the crowd's reaction. I had to have 5th Platoon feeling confident that the event was going to work wonderfully well. From all appearances, they were pumped. The evening was wearing on. Clumps of people had formed throughout the room. Some couples were still dancing, but you knew the end was near. The officers and their ladies were in the far right corner of the hall. They sat together around a large table. Lieutenant Strauss and his lady were with Lieutenant McCook and his wife. They were talking. Suddenly, Lieutenant Strauss shouted out, "Senior Candidate Morton, I want my Chipmunk!" On cue, the 5th Platoon guys and their ladies began converging on the officers' table. The other candidates in the company and their dates automatically converged on the same point. I had my stage. Maneuvering through the crowd, I approached Lieutenant Strauss. "Sir, 5th Platoon has been honored to receive your request. It gives us all a great sense of responsibility to know that our very own tactical officer believes in his OCS candidates enough to make a special request of them. As future infantry officers, we saw your request as a test of our mettle under the most horrendous of conditions, live training to become second lieutenants." The crowd laughed at that, a good sign, I thought, pausing for effect. Lieutenant McCook shouted out, "He doesn't have one! I knew they couldn't do it! I knew!" Cutting him off, I continued, "And in partial fulfillment of your noble request, here is your Chipmonk." With a wave of my hand, I turned to face a crowd as Scotty and Mel made their way to me, holding the stuffed monkey high in the air for all to see. A roar of laughter came from the crowd as Lieutenant shouted out, "I told you no stuffed monkey! I told you that wouldn't do!" Even as he was speaking, Lieutenant McCook's voice rose above the laughter. "I knew it! They were never going to do it! I told you, Ken, didn't I tell you?" I held up my hand for silence and spoke in a loud, commanding voice. "Yes, we knew that a stuffed monkey with chips on its shoulders would be unacceptable." A hush came over the crowd as I continued. "I just wanted you to know that less honorable candidates would try to pull such a cruel and trite hoax on you. The men of 5th Platoon are men of honor. Only a very special Chipmunk would do for the tactical officer of the finest of the men who carry the spirit of the bayonet in their hearts. Sir, we have a heroic Chipmunk to present to you. Because you are so committed to helping us to become the best infantry officers that could possibly be, you may have missed the newspaper stories about our Chipmunk. Being an American Chipmunk, he volunteered to join the U.S. Army on one condition: that he be sent to Vietnam. The crowd cheered good-naturedly at that line. They were with me. I went on with great enthusiasm. I was into it. Without thinking, I moved into a slight crouch as I spoke. He went to Vietnam as a private first class, a PFC, thanks to his dedication, good training, and the Army's early promotion policy. A roar of laughter came from the crowd. Lieutenant Strauss was beaming with joy. Even Lieutenant McCook was smiling. Quickly, the leadership qualities of your Chipmunk showed themselves. He became a buck sergeant, leading his squad into numerous firefights. In the heat of one particularly ferocious battle, your Chipmunk became inadvertently separated from his unit. Being a good soldier, he remained tactical. Another burst of laughter erupted with the guys from 3rd Platoon leading it. In a soft, hushed voice that caused the audience to lean forward to hear, I said, "Your Chipmunk found himself on a lonely trail deep in the jungle. He felt the ground begin to vibrate, faintly at first, then more and more violently. He feared for his life, but he stood his ground, an infantryman through and through. To his amazement, a long line of elephants burst around a bend in the trail. They were carrying supplies for the Viet Cong down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Your Chipmunk knew those supplies could not be allowed to reach the enemy. Single-pawedly, he stood his ground. When the elephants saw this courageous soul defiantly standing in front of them, they panicked. They broke and ran every which way. He had routed the elephants. The crowd roared in spontaneous cheer. I held up my hands for silence. I know you were just too busy training us. To see him honored in the New York's ticker tape parade, our grateful country gave this true hero. President Lyndon B. Johnson had him brought to the White House to receive the Medal of Honor. President Johnson told him that our grateful nation wished to give him anything he wanted for displaying such courage in the face of the enemy. Your heroic but humble Chipmunk stood at attention, looked President Johnson straight in the eye, and said, "There is just one thing I want to do for my country. I want to give up my sergeant's stripes and attend infantry officer candidate school with Lieutenant Strauss as my tactical officer, Mr. President." Lieutenant Strauss, allow me to present this historic Chipmunk to you, I concluded, raising my hands and motioning to the guys in the back of the crowd as the crowd uncontrollably cheered, laughed, and hollered. The guys rushed the cage with the gerbil forward and placed it on the table directly in front of Lieutenant Strauss. The crowd was in pandemonium. The cheering and laughter went on and on. With a huge grin on his face and looking down at the gerbil, Lieutenant Strauss sprang to his feet and grandly declared, "It is a Chipmunk! A heroic Chipmunk! Gentlemen, I accept this Chipmunk in the spirit in which it arrived." Another wave of cheers rose above the ongoing cheers, and laughter hardly noticeable in the noise was Lieutenant McCook hollering, "It's not a Chipmunk! It's not!" The weekend pass was ours.